What's going on, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the German Bear Podcast. And today we got the preseason Week 2 preview of the Chicago Bears against the Seattle Seahawks. The Bears will face the Seahawks at 7 p.m. Central Time in Seattle, so the second game of the season, the first away game. So it will be a short week, and it's interesting to see how the Bears will approach it. The starters will get 6 to 10 snaps, and some even 20 by Matt Eberflus, and the young players will get a lot of playing time as well. So I'm excited to break down this game for you guys. Which players to watch, what expectations should you have from the Bears offense and defense, and we will also take a look at our upcoming opponent. And with that being said, let's actually take a look at them, which are the Seattle Seahawks. And the Seattle Seahawks are a very well-experienced team, especially with the coaching staff. Obviously, you have longtime head coach Pete Carroll right there, and then you have Shane Waldron as the offensive coordinator and Clint Hurt as a defensive coordinator. And the Seattle Seahawks are overall a team that are kind of similar to the Chicago Bears in my opinion. They really had a really big makeover with lots of veterans and longtime players leaving the team and lots of young talent being added to that squad. So some similarities definitely for me right there. And let's start off with the Seattle Seahawks and talk about their free agent losses, and starting off with the biggest one, obviously, which was the Russell Wilson trade. Russell Wilson was traded to the Broncos for a couple of good first-round picks, I think, if I remember correctly, and also a player that we want to talk about later on as well. But obviously, a huge loss for the Seattle Seahawks. Russell Wilson was the Seahawks. He was their franchise guy for lots of years now, played on an extremely high level, really carried those teams to great records, even though at times they were not that talented at all. So Russell Wilson, incredible player, great addition for the Broncos. Yes, he had that with his thumb. Was it his thumb with his hands last year? But I mean, he can bounce back from that, no question. For me, that was just last season. He attempted surgery too early, in my opinion. That led to a kind of down season for him. But Russell Wilson is still one of the best quarterbacks in the league, so big loss for them. As well as the last member of the Legion of Boom. Obviously, it was more like the secondary, but still, Bobby Wagner was a huge part of that team, and he is now on the rivals LA Rams, the current Super Bowl champions. So big addition for them. Huge loss for Seattle. He even wanted to stay there, but they couldn't figure out a contract, which is obviously bad. Then they also lost franchise left tackle even for them. I mean, they had them for a long time now. Dwayne Brown, obviously, he's now, I think, even 37. So he's definitely up there in age, but still a very capable tackle in this league. Also lost veteran edge rusher Carlos Dunlap. Then tight end Gerald Everett, who I think is not that good, honestly, but he left the team as well. And then two good role players for them, Ethan Pocic, who was a interior offensive lineman for them, and DJ Reed, a really solid cornerback. How did the Seattle Seahawks compensate that? I mean, you can't really compensate Russell Wilson and Bobby Wagner within one offseason, but they did still a good job. First off, with the retentions, they retained safety Quandre Diggs, who's really good for them, really talented safety right there. Also, they gave a big deal to wide receiver DK Metcalf, one of the best deep threats in the league, speed, physical demon, absolutely good wide receiver. Obviously, there was these trade rumors about him, and a lot of Bears fans wanted him, me including. But I mean, DK Metcalf stayed there, got a big deal, and good for him. As they also retained cornerback Sidney Jones, running back Rashad Penny, who is really good, emerged late in the season, had a really good stretch down the last couple of weeks for them, so that was kind of incredible by him. Also, defensive lineman Al Woods, who is a solid role player for them. Then they signed cornerback Geno Smith. They retained him. He will probably be the starter, as it looks like, but there's definitely competition for him as well. And then they also retained Will Disley, who is a solid backup tight end for them. So now to the outside signings, and there is the player that I wanted to talk about in that Russell Wilson trade, which is the biggest addition of their, or from the outside of their offseason, which is Noah Fant. The former tight end of the Broncos is still super young, highly talented, and obviously doesn't really justify the move for Russell Wilson, but it's still a good player that they have right there. And I mean, the receiving weapons for them are looking pretty good. We will talk about that later on as well. Then they also added from the Broncos Shelby Harris, defensive lineman, veteran, good, but up there in age, 31 years old now. And also in that trade involved was quarterback Drew Lock. Yes, Drew Lock is now a Seattle Seahawks. If you've not known that by now, I think you probably know that. He is now the competition against Geno Smith. Last week, Geno Smith got the start, and this week, actually, Drew Lock should have started for the Seattle Seahawks against the Chicago Bears, and I would have loved that. I think Drew Lock has some talent, has a really strong arm, and maybe they have something in Seattle with him right there, but he unfortunately just tested positive for COVID and will be out for that game, just to take that away right now. And moving on with the signings, they also got Uchenna Nwosu, good edge rusher from the Chargers. Quentin Jefferson, who I think was a Seahawk before, then went to the Raiders and is now back with the Seahawks. And they also got from the Chiefs center Austin Blythe. So some solid additions. They definitely got younger and also brought in some good veterans, as you should do as an NFL franchise. But the losses definitely overweight the retentions, so a tough offseason for the Seattle Seahawks and their fans, obviously. And to just disclose their outside signings, I want to mention three former Bears that they signed as well. Marquise Goodwin, speedster that we had on last year's roster. Also, cornerback Artie Burns, who was, I'm glad that he's gone. He was actually okay, but still, I think we got better secondary at the moment, definitely. And then they also signed Iggy Joel Iebuniwe, who was a draft pick of Ryan Pace, I think even in the 4th round. And for that value, he was kind of a bust, but still was a good special teamer for us, and I like seeing him sticking in the league as well. As for the NFL draft this season, I think untypically for the Seahawks, they did an actual good job not reaching for anything in the first round to just straight up get over it. They started the draft off with drafting Charles Cross, franchise left tackle for them in the first round. So suddenly, after Russell Wilson leaves, they decide to pick a franchise left tackle, but highly talented player, super good, will be their franchise tackle for years to come. Extremely good in pass coverage, could improve in the run game, but he will learn that for sure, especially with these good running backs that they have at the moment. Then they followed that up with drafting an edge rusher and running back in the 2nd round. They first got Boye Mafe in the 2nd round, which is one of the most talented edge rushers in the entire draft class this season. And it was a loaded draft class, but Boye Mafe, extremely athletic. And if he's developed correctly under Pete Carroll, I think he can be a really good edge rusher in this league. And then they also got running back Kenneth Walker, to just stack up their running back room. Really explosive runner, great power, even though he's kind of undersized, good at catching the football. So a great weapon right there for Drew Lock and that offense. And then they followed that up with another offensive lineman in the 3rd round, Abraham Lucas, who is mainly a right tackle. I liked him a lot coming out of college, and I definitely saw him on the Bears as well if he was available. They drafted him in the 3rd round, and he's a good player for them. Let's see how he turns out. In the 4th round, they got one of my favorite cornerbacks of the draft. So, the Seahawks got a lot of players I really liked. They got cornerback Kobe Bryant, who was a really underrated off-ball cornerback that they got now. I would have loved him opposite of Jalen Johnson, but obviously I'm way happier with Kyler Gordon. I didn't think we'd go with cornerback, but I'd take Kyler any day of the week over Kobe Bryant, but he was still a really good talent, Kobe Bryant, so let's see how he does for him. And then they followed that up in round 5 with probably my favorite prospect that they drafted in this year's draft class, which was another corner, Tariq Woolen out of UTSA. Insane athlete. I think 6'3", 6'4" for a corner is insane nonetheless. But then he also posted the fastest cornerback 40 time ever, I think, with 4.26 as his 40 time, which is just straight up insane. There's nothing about it. Just what a physical beast. He's not flawless. That's why he lasted until the 5th round. I thought he would have been drafted earlier, but because on tape he looked better than he did look at the combine. I think that definitely hurt his stock as well, because just when he was asked to flip hips, he looked really stiff and his technique did not look really good. But if he's getting developed correctly, and I mean, he already showed a lot of good things coming out of Seahawks practices and training camp. I mean, he can be a really good cornerback for them, and it's just an absolute Pete Carroll type of player, perfectly fits them. And then they followed him up with drafting Tyreek Smith out of Ohio State, a good rotational pass rusher for them in the 5th round once again. And then they ended the draft with drafting 2 wide receivers, Derek Young and then also Bo Melton out of Rutgers, who is well known, who had a really good 40 time and is talented, just had not a great quarterback at Rutgers. So he's a talented player to watch out as well. And overall, they brought in really good young talent to this roster. And with that being said, I want to quickly go over the entire roster now, how it looks, the team that we're facing tomorrow. I mean, overall, a talented young roster, and all of our phases, first team, second team, third team, and also the fourth stringers will definitely have their challenges. They have a pretty deep roster. It's similar to the Bears. They don't have insanely good starters, but the depth is kind of good. Just starting it off, receivers, we have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, one of the best 1-2 punches in the league. They also have Twain Eskridge, who is really good. Freddie Swain is not bad. Marquise Goodwin, Bo Melton. So our backups in the secondary will definitely have some work to do as well. So I'm excited for that. Offensive line, they now have Charles Cross at left tackle, Damian Lewis, Austin Blythe, Gabe Jackson traded for him with the Raiders, so he's a really underrated guard, and then also Abraham Lucas. As for Stone Forsythe as a backup tackle as well, so the edge rushers will have their work to do. Also, tight ends, Noah Fant, Will Disley. I'm excited to see. I mean, I'm not sure if Dan Cruikshank will actually play. He would definitely have some good matchups against these tight ends. I would love to see that, but I'm not sure if he will play. But also our linebackers, that's a good challenge for them. Quarterback, Geno Smith, Drew Lock, not the best situation for them. I mean, they have to figure it out for this season at least. Maybe Drew Lock develop something for them, but I mean the chances are pretty low. And then you have the running backs for them, which is a pretty good group for me as well. Rashad Penny as the starter, Kenneth Walker as a backup, which is just a luxury to have, and then also Travis Homer and DJ Dallas. So the Bears will definitely face some good running backs in this game as well. As for the defense, they have in the defensive line Shelby Harris, Al Woods, Poona Ford, Quinton Jefferson, LJ Collier, which was a huge draft bust for them, by the way, in 2019, but still solid depth right there. Outside linebackers, Darrell Taylor, Jordan Brooks, who is kind of that Bobby Wagner replacement. Obviously not nearly on his level, but really played good last season, and now he really gets the main role in that system. Also Uchenna Nwosu, Boye Mafe, Tyreek Smith, Tanner Muse, who is kind of talented. So they got good linebackers in there as well. The defensive line is not bad. It's not a bad defense overall, and it's still Pete Carroll. I mean, he can do something with the defense, no matter which player he has. I think he's still a good coach in this league. As for the cornerbacks, I think that's kind of a weak spot for them. Sidney Jones is not really great. I think he was a draft pick back in 2016, 2017 with the Eagles. That's the only thing I remember about him. Then they have Artie Burns listed as a starter. Kobe Bryant, talented rookie. Tariq Woolen, also pretty talented. But overall, I think that's definitely one of their bigger weaknesses, the cornerback spot. Also in the nickel, they have Justin Coleman. But nothing too outstanding. As for their safeties, that's probably the biggest strength of their defense with Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs, and also Josh Jones as a backup in there, and Bubba Bolden. But overall, it's a solid defense, but definitely the secondary has its weaknesses, so let's see how the Bears attack that. And for the offense, I think it's talented, just a matter of how good the quarterback play is. So, now that we know almost everything about the Seattle Seahawks, it's time to move on to our Chicago Bears and talk about the expectations for the upcoming game. And starting it off with the offense, I think first of all, we want to see the development of Luke Getsy as a play caller and how he involves his weapons into the offense. I think he did an actually good job in the first preseason game. So if you want to check out my preseason film room episode about that from a couple of days ago, there I broke down almost every play, or pretty much every play of the first team offense, and how the play calls were and how the offense looked. I think he did a pretty solid job. It's just about execution at that point. How does the offensive line hold up? How does Justin Fields go through his progressions? I think he did a pretty good job at that, but he wasn't flawless. So just how does the offense move the ball? Which players get involved? Do they call the right plays? I think the Bears offense can do pretty good against this Seattle Seahawks defense, and I definitely want to see them succeed against them, because against the Kansas City Chiefs, they had 2 drives where they really stalled quickly. The second drive was better, and the Bears got better as the game was going on. The third drive was really the best drive. We didn't score in that, but had some really good chunk plays, and we're moving the ball play after play at times. So we definitely want to see that continuing. That trend needs to go upwards, and I think there's a chance against the Seahawks because it is a weaker defense than the Kansas City Chiefs defense. So we just want to see development from the offense. The offensive line needs to hold up to young rookies as well, and I think then we have a good chance of performing at a high level, and we definitely need to see that at the preseason. We need to get a feeling for the offense, what's going on, especially also for the players and the coaches. So I'm excited to see what the offense can do. As for the defense, how can Allen Williams once again coordinate? I think the first drive against the Kansas City Chiefs with the starters on the field, also Patrick Mahomes, everybody on the Chiefs, I think they really got manhandled out there. There were some good plays by the defense, don't get me wrong, but by the end of the day, they were just driving down the field with no problems at all and just scored on the Bears. So we definitely want to fight back this week and show the Seattle Seahawks what the hits principle is. I want to see some turnovers. I want to see the ball being hit out. Obviously, we had some with the second and third stringers, but I want to see that from the first team offense as well. How can the linebackers and defensive line play against these talented running backs? How can the cornerbacks cover DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett? I don't know how much the Seattle Seahawks will play their starters, but they definitely will be some action for them. So how just can the defense go up against these good skill players? And it's not that much about if they're catching a ball, but just the reps, even if they're not getting the ball thrown their way. How does Jalen Johnson do against their best wide receiver? Those are the things that I'm looking forward to, as well as the backups. How can they once again perform? Rookies really stood out on defense on the last game, so let's see how that trend develops. As for the special teams, the expectations are just as always, punt the ball as high and far as you can, and Trenton Gill did a great job with that. Let's see how he continues, as well as Cairo Santos should have a good game once again as well. And with that being said, that brings me to my next segment, which is the players to watch. And starting off with the offense, I think the first player we definitely want to take a closer look at is Justin Fields. He performed well throughout training camp and also did pretty good in the first preseason opener, but he was not without any flaws, definitely not. He missed some reads, which was the only problem I really had. I think the throws were always accurate. The one to Khalil Herbert in the check down route, he was being hit on that throw, so nothing to do about that. But as for the rest of the game, I thought he was pretty accurate. It's just seeing the development of him going through the progressions once again. That's something I want to see about him. As for the running backs, I want to see how Khalil Herbert can actually bounce back in the receiving game after having a rough day against the Chiefs in that kind of regard. So definitely look out for him. As for running back Treston Ebner, does he continue looking that good? Because he was absolutely incredible in the first game, had a really big 27-yard gain. Also that touchdown on that angle route. I'm excited for him, so let's see if that trend actually continues. As for the wide receivers, does Velus Jones Jr. actually get his first game action? That's a big question for me. I definitely want to see the rookie on the field. I mean, he did so many great things in camp so far, and was unfortunate that he was kind of dealing with something minor before the first preseason game. So maybe this time he will finally play, but I'm not sure about it, as he did not take any team reps yesterday as well. So maybe he won't play, but let's just hope for the best. But obviously I don't want to see him getting injured, so whatever's best for the team. And also the backup battle will once again be very interesting with the receivers. Daz Newsome, Isaiah Coulter, Kevin Shaw, Dante Pettis, Nasimba Webster, who can shine this week. I think Daz Newsome has definitely the upper hand at the moment with just stacking great practices and also a great performance against the Chiefs. But who wins it this week? As for the offensive line, Tevin Jenkins at right guard for the first time in his career in the NFL. So how does he do? How does he do in the run game? I expect him to shine in that regard early on in the game as well. And how can he handle the defensive linemen in the NFL? They have some good interior rushers, in my opinion, with Shelby Harris, Al Woods, and maybe he will face also a linebacker or two in that game as well. I mean, the reps probably won't be that much for him either, as he is going to start. So I don't know how long we're going to see him on the field, but I'm looking forward to look at Tevin Jenkins' tape afterwards and breaking it down for you guys as well. As for Braxton Jones, how can he bounce back after this ass-whooping practice by Robert Quinn against him? Allowed 3 to 4 sacks, so let's see how he can respond against these edge rushers. I mean, he probably is going to face some talented ones with especially maybe Boye Mafe. I don't know if he will be with the starters or not, but that would be a really interesting matchup to watch. As for also Larry B, it will be interesting how he does at right tackle with the starters, with Riley Reef probably just being a holdout as a veteran. So Larry Borum getting a shot, definitely he is someone to look after. As for also the second and third stringers, Zachary Thomas and Tyree Carter, the rookies, how do they do? I definitely want to take a closer look at Zachary Thomas this week because I like him a lot, and I actually forgot to watch him closer. I actually wanted to look at his game tape a bit more, but I just, with all the stuff that was going on, I forgot that, so I definitely want to look at him during the game a bit more this week. And with that being said, that wraps up the offense. And with the defense, I think the players to watch, first of all, are the defensive linemen. Can Al-Quadin Muhammad, Robert Quinn, and Travis Gibson continuing to pressure up the quarterbacks? They did that in the first preseason game as well. Robert Quinn did not get any snaps. Maybe he does this week. But Al-Quadin Muhammad and Travis Gibson did a really nice job pressuring Patrick Mahomes. So they did actually pretty good in my opinion. So can they continue that? Also, Dominique Robinson, he will definitely have another great game in my opinion. Had his first NFL sack in the first preseason game and looked so explosive. I'm so excited for him. Such a athletic freak. I love this guy. Definitely one of my favorite players already. So I'm definitely having a close eye on him, and you should as well. As for second-year pro Kairos Tonga, he will be interesting to watch as well. He did a really good job in the first game holding his own, getting double teamed, taking on the blocks that are necessary for the linebackers. I think he did a really good job right there. As for also veteran Trayvon Coley, who we signed a couple of weeks ago now, he had 2 sacks in the first game. Can he maintain that playing level, which would definitely raise him in the depth chart? So that's something interesting to follow with the second and third stringers as well. As for the linebackers, I think rookie Jack Sanborn, when does he actually come in? Is it with the second stringers or third stringers? I mean, he should definitely be in there with the second stringers after having this amazing performance with 7 tackles, 1 interception, 1 fumble recovery. Great start for the UDFA right there. As for the linebacker veterans, Matt Adams and Nicholas Morrow, that combination, how does that flow once again? I think both did a nice job. I think Nicholas Morrow had the weaker game of the both. I think he definitely needs to step up, but Matt Adams did a real good job in the first game, and Nick Morrow also had his moments. So how can they continue developing that kind of bond between those two guys? Obviously, Roquan Smith being out, we have to prepare for everything that happens. I said that in the last preview as well. So let's see how these two guys do. And lastly, I want to come over to the secondary. Big topic for me is definitely the first start of Kyler Gordon's young career. It will be his first game. It is in the state of Washington, so somewhat of a homecoming for him. And the question for me is definitely, where does he ultimately line up? And I mean, that's the thing with him. He was lined up at nickel, at the outside during training camp a couple of times now. So where does he actually line up in game? I expect him to move there nonetheless, but still, how much nickel, how much corner, that's definitely something to work on, as well as how quickly can he impact the game. Jaquan Brisker really impacted the game in his first game, so let's see how Kyler Gordon does. Obviously, he is a cornerback. It's tougher to show impact like a Jaquan Brisker did as a strong safety who was often in the box, blitzing, getting opportunities, but Kyler Gordon is a really talented player, and I can't wait to see him on the field for the first time. And also, a big question, like with the wide receivers, is how does the secondary battle go? Who is winning the backup race? When does Kindle Vildor come in? Duke Shelley, Greg Stroman? What's with Lamar Jackson? Can he bounce back from his last game? I think he was great in coverage, but it still bothers me that he didn't make the play in the flats against Isaiah Pacheco there, where he really just had to wrap up and wanted to make a big hit and just allowed a 7-yard gain right there. That still kind of bothers me. As for the safeties, who's the third safety with Dane Cruikshank and Jaquan Brisker probably out? DeAndre Houston Carson will start next to Eddie Jackson, but who's actually the third guy up behind these other two guys? That will be interesting as well. As lastly for the special teams, can Trenton Gill follow his great performance up and keep it going? The punter is definitely someone to watch in that game. He had incredible hang time last weekend and also just pinned the Chiefs offense 3 times inside the 20. Did an incredible job to start off his rookie campaign. So definitely look out for him. As for the return game, who returns the punts is a big question for me as well. If Velus Jones Jr. is actually being held out of the game, does Daz Newsome get a new shot at it, or is someone else actually receiving the punts after he muffed one in the Chiefs game? So that will be interesting as well. So overall, I'm super excited for the second preseason game of the Chicago Bears season. We have lots of young players that will actually get a lot of playing time. We got the starters for some plays as well, so definitely stay tuned for my breakdown afterwards. I'm excited to see every single player just once again. It's Bears season. I'm excited. Everything just feels good. So definitely be excited for this game, and hopefully with this video, I could help you just being excited for this preseason game as well. And with that being said, that's the end of the video, guys. I hope you've enjoyed it. Like and subscribe if you liked the video. Check out Instagram and Twitter if you want to as well. And as always, guys, bear down.